learning a Hanukkah Maimer. Now, we're going to learn another Hanukkah Maimer on Hanukkah with the winter program. This winter program, I think, overlaps Hanukkah. So we'll do a Hanukkah Maimer in the winter program also. A different Hanukkah Maimer, don't worry. There's enough to go around. What we'll do in between, well, we'll see. We'll see when we finish this and how that all works out. Hanukkah is not, it's less than 2 weeks away, so it's around the corner. Teach a class Monday night in one of the SEMs. So I gave them an assignment for next week. Then I realized, well, no, next week is Yud Ches Kislev, which is Erev Yud Tes Kislev, so there won't be a class next week. The week after that is Chaf Hei Kislev. It's a night class. Well, okay, there's no night class Hanukkah. The week after that, it's the last day of Hanukkah. Okay, there's no night class. So that means a month. I'm going to see these girls for a month right now. Right? So no assignment. Just have a good time. Okay, now this is actually the last Hanukkah Maimer we heard from the Rebbe. It said in Tafshin Mem Ches. The Rebbe basically stopped saying Maimarim in Tafshin Mem Ches. Tafshin Mem Tes, there's a couple of Maimarim. Tafshin Mem Ches, the year the Rebbe's wife passed away. So after the Rebbe's wife passed away, basically the Rebbe stopped saying Maimarim. Why? Don't know. That's just what happened. So this is a late Maimer relative to Maimarim. And it discusses a very interesting issue in Hanukkah. There are 3 basic miracles in Hanukkah. The war, finding the Pach Shemen, and the Shemen and the oil burning for 8 days. Right? Those are the 3 basic miracles that happen on Hanukkah. Right? Now, if you look in different places, both in Chazal and in davening, and in different books that have discussed Hanukkah over the years, so you'll find sometimes an emphasis on the war, sometimes an emphasis on the miracle of the Shemen. If you look in the Gemara, the Gemara that we'll start learning actually over Hanukkah in our Gemara class, we'll learn that little piece of Gemara. In the second parak in Shabbos, there's a Gemara that starts with the words "My Hanukkah." What's Hanukkah? Which is a funny thing. I mean, we all know what Hanukkah is, but the Gemara had to explain what Hanukkah is. And what is it? It does mention that there was a war, but very, definitely not the emphasis on the war. The emphasis is on the miracle of the Shemen, and that's the Gemara. So is the miracle about is the miracle about the Shemen? Well, there's definitely a miracle about the Shemen. There's no doubt about that. And it's an 8-day holiday because of the miracle of the Shemen. If it were a holiday only celebrating the victory in the wars, it would be a 1-day holiday. Right? There's another holiday like that celebrates a victory in a war, and it's a 1-day holiday. What's that? Purim. No, it's a 2-day holiday here in Eretz Yisrael because there's also the second day, Shushan Purim, but it's basically a 1-day holiday. Here in Eretz Yisrael, if you hear Purim, so you will celebrate Purim for 2 days. Oh, but I missed this so much when I was gone. Next time I go, I just want to record it. So every now and then I can just, listen to it on my phone.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so maybe it's me, huh? I just love this. Warnings in Hebrew to a bunch of English speakers. So, come on.
מערכת גילוי אש ופעלה. יש להישמע להוראות קצין הכבאות. תודה.
Hopefully that'll be the... Oh, come on. There's no one around to stop it. There we go. Anyway, I'll try to talk over it. What can I do? Okay, so the Rambam mentions the war. Now, what's the difference? What difference does it make? Well, first of all, obviously, we'd like to understand what exactly is the miracle. In Al-Nisim, which we say in davening, the war is mentioned more. And the miracle of the Pach Shemen really isn't mentioned at all. So exactly what Hanukkah is all about is an interesting question. Now, what would the difference be? Well, if the Iker miracle is the war, then it should be a holiday of eating and drinking. If the Iker miracle is the Pach Shemen, then it should be a holiday of Hallel v'Hoida'ah, of spiritual praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. because it's a spiritual miracle. As opposed to the miracle of the war is a physical miracle. What do you do when you celebrate the victory in a war? Well, what do we do? Purim. We eat and drink. Right? Okay. So now the Rambam does actually mention the fact, if you look in the Rambam in Hilchos Chanukah, the Rambam mentions the war and mentions the fact that it's Yemei Simcha and Halal V'Hoida'ah. And Simcha means eating and drinking. That's Simcha. Right? So the Rambam combines them both. If you look in other Rishonim, you'll find more an emphasis on the Pak Shemen. If you look in the Gemara, you'll find an emphasis on the Pak Shemen. And the Gemara does not talk about Simcha, it talks about Halel V'Hoida'ah. Now, we don't make Sudas. There's no mitzvah to have a Suda every night on Hanukkah. Eating sufganiyot is not a mitzvah. Right? So you don't have to be Meser Nefesh to eat oil, don't worry. Latkes is a mitzvah deraisa, and if you don't eat latkes, then I don't know what's going to happen. But jelly donuts is not a mitzvah. If you can get the ones with caramel in the middle, so that might be that. We'll have to talk about that. That's a question. It might be that there's something there. The jelly ones, those are for the kids. Okay? So again, 3 mitzvahs. The war, 3 happenings. The war, finding the Pach Shemen, and the Shemen burning for 8 days. Those are the 3 miracles that happened around Hanukkah time. And what exactly are we celebrating? That's the issue in Hanukkah. Okay? And again, you find different places describing or emphasizing different things. One other interesting question, this is just all the Hakdama to discussing Hanukkah B'chlal. When did the war end? Chaf dalet or Chaf Hey? So some people say Chaf dalet. That's the most accepted position, but there's also positions that say Chaf Hey. The war ended on Chaf Hey. What's the difference? Well, there's an interesting question asked. If, according to the position that the war ended on Chaf dalet, which is definitely the position you'll find most, and that's the position that's going to be discussed in this minor. And it was the next day that all the miracles with the oil began. So then you find something interesting. The Alter Rebbe asks about this in Torah Or and Likutei Torah. You find something interesting that generally we celebrate the day a miracle happens. Pesach. Sukkot isn't celebrating a particular miracle per se. Right? Pesach, we celebrate the 15th. The miracle happened on the 15th, we celebrate the 15th. Shavuos, we celebrate the day that Matan Torah was given to us. Hanukkah and Purim are unique. We celebrate the next day. Hanukkah, the Purim, definitely we know. When did the war end on Purim? It's written in the Megillah. This is not esoteric information. 13th of Adar. What do we celebrate? 14th. When did the war end in Shushan? On the 14th, right? So therefore, what day do we celebrate? The 15th. Manyan. Why don't we celebrate the day the war ended? No, we celebrate the next day. Also Hanukkah. According to the majority opinion, the war ended Chaf dalet. And we celebrate Chaf Hey. Why don't we celebrate Chaf dalet? We celebrate Tesvav Nisan, the day that the miracles of Pesach happened. We celebrate the day the Torah was given to us. We don't celebrate the next day. So why, dafka, relative to these 2 holidays, that the Rebbe is going to deal. The Rebbe will not deal with that directly at all in this mimer. But once you learn the whole mimer, you'll also have an understanding of that, perhaps at least relative to Hanukkah. But that's an interesting question. The Alter Rebbe asked that question in Torah, or also in Likutei Torah, relative to these 2 holidays, which of course are not Torah holidays; they're rabbinic holidays, right? They're after the end of Devarim. Okay. It's also a question that's just a challah question that has nothing to do with our minor. Why there's nothing scriptural about Hanukkah? It is about Purim. About Hanukkah. That happened much later. Okay. Just so we appreciate these things, because sometimes it's taken for granted, and I'm not taking anything for granted. When was Hanukkah? Thank you very much, Yaakov. You restored my confidence in humankind. second Beis HaMikdash, near the end of the period of the second Beis HaMikdash. Right? When was Purim?
Fourth.
Well, that's a pretty long. Okay, so
But then
Shavuos.
within-
When was Purim? Well, you're right. Say it.
After the first
Ah,
destruction.
Yefet. In between the first and second Beis HaMikdash. Yefet. Purim was in between the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash and the rebuilding of the second Beis HaMikdash. Right? I mean, according to some, the Persian king who allowed us to rebuild the second base because they were still in charge. To rebuild it was Esther's son, according to some positions. Right? Okay, Esther was the queen of his father. So that was in between the two. Mordechai, interesting enough, in that whole story, we'll talk about that obviously around Purim time, but that's all very interesting. Mordechai, already in the time of the story of Purim, Ezra and Nehemiah had come back from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. There was a return of people from Persia to Eretz Yisrael. And Mordechai didn't go and was chastised by many in his generation for not going. And he said, I have unfinished business over here. And we certainly know what that unfinished business was. Purim. Purim certainly wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Mordechai and Esther. Right? So Mordechai stayed. He was a rather high-ranking minister in the court of the king. Right? Amazing story, the story of Purim. Absolutely astounding. Because you're talking about, the world power. 127 countries under the rulership of Achashverosh. That's a lot of countries. Okay. But back to Hanukkah, because that's what's al haperek, Kislev. When most people think of Kislev, they think of Hanukkah. Lubavitchers think of all sorts of other stuff. Rosh Chodesh, Yud Dalet. This Thursday night there'll be a major Farbrengen. What happened Yud Dalet Kislev? Major for right, the Rebbe's wedding. And the Rebbe says, this is the day I became Shaykh to you. This is the day that connected me to you. Because the Rebbe became Rebbe because he married the Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter, right? So the Rebbe said about that day, one for bringing Yud Dalet Kislev, the Rebbe said, this is the day that connected me to you. It's a rather major day for us. Tes and Yud Tes. Kislev, I was just listening to someone Farbrengen on my phone the other day. They're just a recording of an old Farbrengen, and he said he doesn't understand why we say Tachnan B'chalal in Kislev. We should just not say Tachnan the whole month like Tishrei. In Nisan, Tishrei, every day there's
I agree.
The worst thing in the world is when a student walks into Mayanot at the beginning of Kislev and he thinks that we never learn because every second night there's a major celebration and then the next morning it's sort of hard and he's like, what goes on right there? These guys never. This is like a wild bunch celebrating every night. Yes, Baruch Hashem is what to celebrate. Okay, so let's see what the Rebbe says. Veata, but again, Tafshin Memches, this Maimon said. The Rebbe's going to deal with all three miracles in a rather astounding way. Veata berachamecha rabim, and you in your great mercy. That's the name of the Maimer. If anybody asks you what Maimer you're learning, you say Veata berachamecha rabim Tafshin Memches. That's the name of this Maimer. Amadete lehem be'es tzarasam. You stood. This is alanisim. This is the addition to davening on Hanukkah and benching on Hanukkah. Alanisim. Amadete lehem be'es tzarasam. You stood for them in the time of their trouble. Masarti gibarim biyad chalashim. You gave, right? Limsar is to give over. You gave over strong people in the hands of weak people. I mean, they were very strong and we were relatively weak. Rabim, many, biyad ma'atim, in the hands of the few, etc. Umedayik kfeit gedish moricham yadmer b'ma'amar or dibur maskal zeh. Umedayik, he learns carefully. A diuk is a careful learning of something. The word bidiuk means exact, an exact learning of something. So as usual, our Rebbe's Maimer is based on a Maimer of one of the previous Rebbeim. In this case, the Rebbe's Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said in his Maimer, Dibur Maschel Zeh, that has the same heading. This is a Maimer. What's the name of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer? Veata berachamecha rabim. Same name. Shenemar lifnei chamishim shana, that he said 50 years ago. Taf reish tzadi ches. Okay, this was said in Taf shin mem ches, right? 5748. The Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer was said in 5698. That's 50 years. Okay? Hare Iker Hanes de Chanukah. The Iker Nes of Chanukah, that was 1938. Okay? Interesting times. Where was the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1938? Yeah, where in Europe? Yeah, you're right. Poland. Right? Just derech agav, we discovered. I don't know whether it's on the bottles here. I assume it's not. But we discovered something quite astounding in all the Smirnoff bottles that we were encountering, which was Baruch Hashem, quite a few in the days I was in 770, because it was Rosh Chodesh Kislev. We sat till 5 in the morning till in 770, and then there was Meitzi Shabbos. We sat till 3:34 in the morning. So in 770 for bringing, and Smirnoff's is the drink of choice in 770, Baruch Hashem. Some things are still the way they should be. And if you look at Smirnoff's bottle, of course, in the back, so the F and the F, it spells the OFF at the end from the back of the bottle says 770. Okay, so that everybody knows. That's old. Then we discovered at about 2 in the morning, in a moment of great enlightenment on Rosh Chodesh Kislev, that on the bottle of American bottles of Smirnoff, it says, from Russia to Poland to France and America. This is the Rebbe's vodka if you're ever going to talk about it. Right? From Russia to Poland to France to America. Smirnoff's has, and then this blurb about Smirnoff's. Why they pick those 4 countries? Because I guess only Lubavitchers drink Smirnoff, so they need to Okay. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said this Maimon, tough Reish Tzadi Ches. And if, go to the shelf by the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimon, you can pull off tough Reish Tzadi Ches off the shelf and you'll find this Maimon that the Rebbe is quoting. And the Rebbe says there, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Hari Iker HaNes de Chanukah hu HaNes de Nitzochan HaMilchoma. The essential Nes of Chanukah was the Nes, the miracle of the victory of the war, Nitzochan HaMilchoma, Shahaya B'chaf dalet Kislev. It was on the 24th. Now, as we said, that itself is an interesting question. Look at footnote 3. Kain hu dasa Meiri. That's the position of the Meiri in the Gemara Shabbos. Right? The Meiri is a famous Rishon. We're going to run into the Meiri in the next Maimer we learn, because the Meiri talks also about the Iker Nes of finding the Pach Shem, which itself is interesting. Right? Most people don't think about that part, even though that's written. Right? That the Nes is that what was there for 1 day burned for 8. But they found the Pach Shemen. Now most people think the Pach Shemen was about this big. They found it hidden in a little corner. Well, there was enough oil in the Pach Shemen to light the menorah for 1 day. How much oil was put in the menorah every night? Each bulb was about half a liter. So there were a few liters of oil in that tiny little flask that they found hidden under, hidden in a crack. No, it was this big. How did the Greeks not see that? The next time we'll learn about Hanukkah. During Hanukkah, we'll discuss that. So the Meiri says that the war was ended on Chaf Dalet. Keep reading that footnote. Keinu Dasa Meiri, Shabbos, Chaf Aleph Beis. That's where the Gemaras are. Uberoiva Mekemis B'Chassidus. And the Rebbe says in most places in Chassidus, it's understood that was the day, right? Mavur after the brackets. Mavur Kadei Azu. V'rei Lekutei Sichos Chelik Lamed Amud 206 Ha'ara 22. Okay, the Rebbe says if you want to see a discussion on this, you can look in Lekutei Sichos. So if you want to see a discussion on this, you can look in Lekutei Sichos. The most famous footnote of the Rebbe about Hanukkah is in Lekutei Sichos Chelik Yud. There's a Hanukkah mimer there in the 10th volume of Lekutei Sichos. Footnote 6 discusses major issues about Hanukkah, all sorts of different fascinating issues about Hanukkah. That's like the famous footnote of the Rebbe on Hanukkah. So the war was on Chaf Daled. Va'ad, the Friedrich Rebbe says that's, back to our mimer, that the Friedrich Rebbe says is the most important miracle. Va'ad, shezeh hayagam hasiba, this was also the reason, lahanes tepach hashemen, for the miracle of Pach Hashemen. If we hadn't won the war and then recaptured the Beis Hamikdash and purified the Beis Hamikdash from the tumah that they had brought about in the Beis Hamikdash, so then there wouldn't have been any need for the extra miracle of finding the Pach Hashemen, which itself is interesting. After having won the war and then recapturing the Beis Hamikdash and reestablishing the Beis Hamikdash as a place where we could do the service in the Beis Hamikdash, in order to light the menorah, we needed an extra miracle. Understand? It's just one of the things we do in Beis Hamikdash. Why do we need an extra miracle in order to light the menorah? The miracle of winning the war allowed us to go back into the Beis Hamikdash and purify the Beis Hamikdash after they had gone out of their way to defile it. So now it's ready to go. No, it's not ready to go. We need another miracle. 2 more miracles. I mean, we really need one, finding the Pach Shemen. And then that Pach Shemen turned into an even longer miracle because the Shemen lasted for 8 days instead of 1. Okay. Which is interesting why that had to be. But the Friedrich Rebbe in his mimer says the Iker Nes, the Iker miracle is the war, because everything came as a result of that. Vad Shezeh Haya, 4th line again. Hayagam Asiba, that's the reason Lanes the Pach Hashemen, the miracle of Pach Hashemen, Shaya B'chafei Kislev. That was on the 25th. Finding the Pach Shemen, that happened on the 25th of Kislev. Kedi Isa B'Gemara, as the Gemara says, Kishagavru Beis Chashmonai, when they overcame, they overcame the Greeks, the house of the Chashmonaim, V'nitzchum, and they emerged victorious. V'az Dafka, what does it say right afterwards? Matzu Pach Echad Shel Shemen. They found 1 Pach of Shemen. Now again, this Pach was a big Pach. It wasn't a little vial. It was enough to fill up the menorah, all 7 candles. Nasa beines, this is a continuation of what's written in the Gemara. Nasa beines, a nace happened to that oil that they found. V'idliku mimenu shmini yamim, and they lit from it 8 days. Exactly how that works is also a fascinating discussion, but we can't get into everything about Hanukkah. We'll probably discuss that the second time we go through Hanukkah in a minute. All right. V'lama kavu hascholas yemei Chanukah b'chafei b'kislev. This is the question the Friedrich Rebbe asks. Why did they establish the beginning of the days of Hanukkah on Chafhei Kislev, the day they found the Shemen and that the miracle of the candles started to happen? Shebei haya nes hanedus, that was the day of the miracle of the nedus, v'loy b'chav dalet, and not chav dalet, which is the day of the miracle of the milchama. Okay, now this is a slightly different question than the question we asked before in the name of the Alter Rebbe. Right. Here, they just take this question of the Friedrich Rebbe at face value, what he says. There are 2 major, well, again, 3, but we'll say 2. There's 2 major miracles in Hanukkah: the war and the Neder's. The Iker miracle, the Alter Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe says, that's how he's learning the story. You don't have to learn the story that way. You could say the Iker miracle is the candles, okay? But he's not learning that way. So the Iker miracle is the milchama. And what does he say is the source of such an idea? Well, because if it weren't for the milchama, there wouldn't have been a miracle with the Neiros, right? If we didn't recapture the Beis Hamikdash, so then nothing to happen inside the Beis Hamikdash. So the Iker miracle is winning the war, and that happened on Chav Daled, according to most positions. And the Rebbe quotes the Meiri below. The second miracle was the miracle of the Neiros. Why does the holiday start on the day of the miracle of the Neiros and not start on the day of the miracle of the war? That's the Rebbe's question. The Rebbe, okay, Seder? Now the Rebbe is going to explain the question even more in the next paragraph. But that's the basic question in the Friedrich Rebbe's mind. And that's the question the Rebbe wants to understand in this mind. Before we understand that question, the answer to the question, the Rebbe wants us to understand the question more. And let's keep going. V'yesh leimer. That which the Friedrich Rebbe learns carefully in his mimer. Hatam, the reason. Al shekavu Chanukah b'chafei b'kislev. The reason that they established Hanukkah on the 25th of Kislev, v'loy b'chav daled b'kislev, and not on the 24th of Kislev. Udeloika diuk, and now switch gears. The Rebbe's now going to say there's another issue that the Frierdiker Rebbe is not dealing with. And not like the diuk, not like the learning that some other people have. So now we're going to have to learn how we're not learning. Yeah? You ready for that? Mm-hmm. This is how we're not learning the following way. Not like the diuk, become a drushim, in a number of drushim. And when the Rebbe says drushim, means my marim of our rebbeim. Kailel gam, including also drushim. Drushim means my marim. Shas chalosem he, that the beginning of those maimarim he b'dibra maskel zeh, they begin with the same dibra maskel, Veata berachamecha rabim, a quote from Alanisim. And this is what they ask over there. Madua kavu Chanukah al hanes tepach hashemen v'loy al hanes t'nitzachon ha'melchama. Why was it established, the holiday of Chanukah, on the miracle of the barrel of oil and not the miracle of winning the milchama? That's the question that's asked in other places. That's not what the Frierdiker Rebbe is asking. Again, what did the Frierdiker Rebbe ask? Why is it, if the war is the Iker Nes, why is it that we celebrate Chaf Hey and not Chaf Dalet? That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe asked. The other Maimarim that the Rebbe is now mentioning, they asked, why are we celebrating the oil and not the war? That's a different question. Right? Yeah? We understand the difference between those two questions?
We can say it one more time. We're saying one's about winning. Say it again.
There's three miracles in Purim, in Hanukkah. Winning the war, finding the Shemen, and the Shemen burning for 8 days. Okay. Now, we're going to leave behind the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer for a second. The Rebbe just quoted. What do most people ask? We won the war on the 24th. The miracle of the oil started on the 25th. Why do we celebrate the miracle of the oil and not the miracle of the war? In other words, why do we start the holiday on the 25th and not the 24th? That's what most people ask. That's what the Rebbe is quoting now. That's not what the Frierdiker Rebbe asks in the Maimer that the Rebbe quoted to us. The Frierdiker Rebbe asks, since the Iker of the Nes is the war, and that's what we're celebrating, so then why do we start celebrating on the 25th and not the 24th is when the war ended? That was the Frierdiker Rebbe's question. That's a different question. The other question was, why are you making the Iker of the Nes the oil and not the war? That's not the Frierdiker Rebbe's question. The Frierdiker Rebbe doesn't have a question as to what the Iker Nes is. What's the essential miracle according to the Frierdiker Rebbe? The war. So then why the 25th? Other Maimarim ask, what is the Iker miracle? The war or the oil? Oh, that's a separate question. Frierdiker Rebbe is not asking that question. He doesn't have a question. He knows what the Iker miracle is. According to the Frierdiker Rebbe, in the Maimer that the Rebbe is learning, what's the Iker miracle? The war. Said it. That's not an issue. The issue is so why are we on the 25th and not the 24th? Right?
Sounds like it's the next stage of the question.
I don't know what it is. I don't have to get too fancy. I like to keep things simple. Right? It's not. I think the Rebbe is saying it's not the same question. So I'll stay there. I don't have to make it more complicated than it is. Really, it's not it might just confuse me. Right? The Rebbe is just saying it's not the same. Let's look at it again. I start from Deloika Diuk, second line again. Udeloika Diuk become a drushim. I'm skipping the brackets. Madua kavu Chanukah ala nes tepach hashemen. Why was the holiday established on the miracle of the oil, v'loy ala nes t'nitzachon ha'melchama, and not on the war? The Frierdiker Rebbe's question was, the holiday is established on the miracle of the war. Why is it the 25th and not the 24th? Other people ask, why did we establish it on the oil and not on the war? That's not the Frierdiker Rebbe's question. Okay, keep reading. Who ki bedrushim hanal, those maimarim, kai, they're standing on, meaning they're relating to lashita, to the position. and this is what the Rebbe discusses in that sikha we mentioned in Chelek Yud. Shayom Tov de Chanukah nikra rak al Nes HaNeros. That the Yom Tov of Chanukah was established only for the Neros, not the war. V'lochein medayik, therefore they ask the question, Shilachura, wait a minute. If we're celebrating this holiday because of the miracle of the oil, why? I don't understand. What happened to the war? Isn't the war important? They're asking. But their a priori assumption is the whole holiday is about the oil. Because there is such a position. Okay, so based on that position, what question would you ask? Why aren't we paying attention to the war also? It's also an important thing, isn't it? Might even be the most important thing. And as a matter of fact, the only reason there was a miracle of the oil was because of the victory in the war. Why are we emphasizing the oil and not the war? That's their question. It's a great question. Right? Shilachura Iker, they say, L'chein Medayak Shilachura, at first glance, say Iker hu nitzachon milchama. The most important thing is winning the war. Because again, without winning the war, there wouldn't have been a miracle with the oil. So why are we celebrating the oil? They're asking. V'lama asu mi'atofel, and why did they make from that which is secondary, the oil, secondary? Iker, the essential reality, oil. Meaning the war is though. Why did they take that which is secondary to the war and make it the most important part? Umia Iker, and from the most important part, which is the war, tafel, something secondary that isn't even mentioned. We're not even celebrating it. And how do we see we're not celebrating it? It's no mitzvah to eat. Right? Yeah? We're there with the Rebbe? The Rebbe wants us to think a little. I know, it's an annoying thing. Let's just understand this. Right? Now, come on, just tell me some nice, fuzzy little vort that'll make me feel better. No. Everyone wants to learn his story well. So they're asking that the position that holds that the miracle was that the holiday was established because of the miracle of the oil, they're asking a question. Based on that position, which exists in the Torah world, there's such a position. So based on that position, you can ask a question. What's with the war? The war seems to be more important. Why are we celebrating the 25th? We should celebrate the victory in the war. That's their question. That's a great question. But that's not the question the Rebbe's quoting the previous Rebbe asking. Previous Rebbe's asking the following question. This holiday was established because of the victory in the war. So why are we celebrating the 25th and not the 24th? That's a different question, right? It's not a matter of why are we ignoring the war. We're not ignoring the war. We're celebrating the war the next day. Why? Why don't we celebrate it the day it happened? That's the Friedrich Rebbe's question.
The war happened on...
War ended on... Our position in this mimer is the war ended on the 24th. That's our position. That itself is a function of a certain disagreement. But as we saw in the footnote, the Rebbe says that most of Chassidus going along that line, that's the Meiri. One of the Rishonim explains that that's when the war ended, and that's the position that we are accepting, and also the people that the Rebbe just quoted that we're not learning like, that's what they also accepted. The war ended on 24th. Let's just say that, and we'll pretend there's no other position. So the war is the 24th. Finding the Pach Shemen is the 25th. And what actually is the first day of the miracle with the oil? 26th. No miracle on the 25th burning the oil because they had enough oil for one day. So now it becomes the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th. Manyen. That's really how it all works out in terms of the miracles. There's a miracle on the 24th, we won the war. There's a miracle on the 25th, we found the Shem. And there's a miracle on the 26th. Still burning, man. Look. Wow. Yeah?
Wasn't it lit in the 25th? Wasn't it lit in the 25th?
Yeah, but there was enough oil for one day. That's not a miracle. Right? They had enough oil for one day. How it worked out the second day? Interesting question. Right? The Rebbe asked an amazing question in a Sikha It's actually a sikh in Parshas Chayei Sarah because it's talking about, it's comparing the oil to Sarah's dough, which also just never ran out, right? The dough from Sarah's challah, and also the candle in Sarah's tent never went out, just like Hanukkah. That's Parshas Chayei Sarah, when Rivka comes into, when Yitzchak and Rivka enter into Sarah's tent. So that all returned, those miracles returned. So the Rebbe does ask such a Rebbe question. If you're going to say that all the oil burnt the first night, which is naturally what would happen, that would all burn down, right? And then it would go out. And then the next day it was full again. So that's a problem, the Rebbe says. Why? Because the mitzvah is to light oil from an olive, not oil from a mitzvah. That oil didn't come from an olive. It came from a mitzvah. Only the Rebbe would ask a question like that. So the Rebbe has a fascinating understanding as to how the whole thing happened, which we're not going to get into right now, but it's just, the question is such an amazing question. The mitzvah is to take olive oil, not miracle oil. If it just showed up the second day and it's third, fourth, fifth, sixth, then it's miracle oil. Well, that you're not mekayim the mitzvah if you're lighting miracle oil. That's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to light olive oil. That oil didn't come from an olive. If you took it into a laboratory and tested it, you would say, "Oh, this is olive oil," but it's not. It's not olive oil. It's mitzvah oil or miracle oil. Oh. Only the Rebbe would ever ask a question like that. Such an astounding question. So the Rebbe has an amazing take on how it all happened. You can look up the sikh. I forget what chelik. I think it might be chelik lamed. I think a lot of the action is in chelik lamed. I'm pretty sure it's chelik lamed. Chayei Sarah. I think, is that right? Might not be, because I think it's a Yiddish sikh. I mean, it's been translated into Hebrew, but I think it originally was Yiddish, which means it's not lamed. I don't know. We'll find it. Okay, 4 lines up from the bottom. They're asking, since the milchama is the ikr, why do we make the neres the ikr by starting the holiday on the 25th? That's their question. The Frierdiker Rebbe is asking, since the milchama is the ikr, why do we start the holiday on the 25th and not the 24th? Different question. Okay. Uba Maimer Zeh, now the Rebbe is getting back to our Maimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. Kai is relevant to, standing on. La Shita, to the position. Shekviyas Yom Tov Techanaka is basically the Rambam. Kviyas Yom Tov Techanaka, he gam mitzad hanes nitzachon hamelchama, is also as a result of the nes, the miracle of nitzachon hamelchama, of winning the war. Va'ad, to such an extent, shahaydah, the thanks that we give the va'al nisim in davening, not the Gemara. The Gemara barely mentions the milchama, but in al nisim in davening, what's that about? He be'ikr is essentially al nezeh, the milchama. That's what we talk about, right? Giving the many into the few, the tamei into the hands of the tar, the rishayim into the hands of the tzaddikim. We're talking about the victory in the war.
What is doel?
What?
What is doel?
What is?
Doel. Doel.
The barachamecha.
Without. Okay.
The of, quote, va'al nisim. Shoyda de of va'al hanisim, quote, end quote, he be'ikr al nes zeh, the milchama. V'hoyda al hanes de pacha shemen, and the thanks that we give for the miracle of pacha shemen, he al yedei hadlokas ner Chanukah, is by virtue of lighting the neders. Right? That's the shita that the Frierdiker Rebbe is dealing with. 2 shitas in what the Iker Nes. Again, everybody agrees the Iker Nes of Chanukah is the Milchama, because without the Milchama, nothing would have happened. Okay. That being said, what are you, when you're talking about Chanukah, which Nes do you emphasize? So if you look in the Gemara, that it emphasizes the nace of the Neres. If you look in Alanisim, it emphasizes the nace of the Milchama. Okay, so in the Gemara and davening, which is coming from the same people, there's this tension. Our mimer is learning clearly the Iker is the Milchama. Then the question arises, so why are we celebrating the next day and not the day that we won the war? Why are we celebrating Chafei and not Chav Dalet? That's the question in our mind. There are other Maimarim that have a different question, based on the position that the Iker miracle, again, everybody agrees the Iker miracle is the Milchama, but that the Iker miracle that we're celebrating is the candles, the naders, the shemen, the oil. So their question is, according to those people who are, our Rebbeim, who are learning a Maimer Chassidus based on the position that the Iker is the Pach Shemen, so their question is, why are we emphasizing the Pach Shemen? We should be emphasizing the Milchama. Because that's the Iker. We made the most important secondary, and that which is secondary most important. Because there's no miracle of Pach Shemen if we didn't win the war. That's just simple pshat. So that's the question in other Maimarim. In this Maimer, the Iker is the Milchama, that's what we're celebrating. And there is such a position. Then why are we celebrating on the 25th and not the 25th? Yeah? Two completely different questions. Because they're coming from two completely different understandings as to what we're actually celebrating. According to the position that we're celebrating the candles, well, of course you're going to celebrate on the 25th. Why would you celebrate on the 24th? Nothing happened with candles on the 24th. You'll celebrate from the 25th. Right? If your position is the Iker is what we're celebrating is winning the war, so then why are you celebrating on the 25th? Celebrate the 24th. You won the war on the 24th. Right? VE Day, which probably most of you have never heard of. VE Day used to be a day. What was that? Victory in Europe Day. The day the war ended in Europe. Because it didn't end, right? The war was still going on in Asia. That ended later. A few rather large bombs put an end to that war, right? But the war in Europe ended earlier. And people used to celebrate not the day after, that day, the day of the victory, the day when the Germans surrendered. That was the day that was celebrated. Pretty reasonable thing to celebrate. Why do you celebrate the next day? Celebrate the day they surrendered. Right? So then that's the question. Why are you celebrating the 25th? Celebrate the 24th. That's when you won the war. Right? That's the Friedrich Rebbe's question. Okay, let's go further. V'lochein, middle of the second line up from the bottom of the page. Hadiuk b'maimer zeh, the careful reading, meaning the question that's being asked. In our Maimer, meaning the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, which this Maimer of the Rebbe is based on, Hu zeh sheyamei Chanukah, that is, that the days of Chanukah, shenikva'u, that were established, gam al nes the nitzachon milchama, also on the miracle of the war, va'adarabba, on the contrary, inyan zehu l'cha'ora ikar anes, this idea, this matter, is at first glance the essential miracle, meaning the most important part is the war. So then the question arises, va'ad shezeh haya gam hasiba l'nes the Pach HaShemen, because this was also the reason for the Pach Shemen, right? We said that earlier. So why maschilim b'chafei Kislev? Why are we starting on the 25th? Sheboy haya nes deneders. That was the day of the miracle of the candles, finding the candle, finding the oil. V'loy b'chav dalet b'Kislev, and not on chav dalet b'Kislev, which is the day of the victory in the war. Okay, that's the Friedrich Rebbe's question. Yeah, after all that, we understand the question. Now, we could have understood the question without the whole second paragraph, if we didn't know anything, right? But the Rebbe knows something. The Rebbe says, I just want you to understand the background of this question. There is another way of asking this question, right? But that's not what we're doing. We're not asking the question that's asked in place A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We're not asking the question that way. We're asking the question a unique way. What's that? The ik is the war. Why the 25th, not the 24th? What did everybody else ask? We're celebrating Pach Shemen. Why are we celebrating the Shemen? Why don't we celebrate the war? The Friedrich Rebbe's question is, we're celebrating the war on the 25th. Why the 25th? Why not the 24th? Yeah? Okay. Baruch Hashem. So now we're enlightened. We have time for base.
How do you translate matchil?
From the beginning. Beginning. No, it's a verb. Mathilim. Beginning. Umamshich ba'maimer. He continues in the Maimer, Friedrich Rebbe. Shebanesa shemen gufa, and we already talked about this in our introduction to all of this. In the Nesa shemen gufa, in the miracle of the oil itself, gufa, hayu shnei nisim. There were two miracles. Hanei shematzu pach echad shemen tahor. The miracle, shematzu, they found, pach echad shemen, one flask of shemen, tahor, pure, chasum, sealed, b'choismei shel kohen gadol, with the seal of the kohen gadol. That's what they found. And that oil was usable because it was still pure. It hadn't been defiled like all the other oil. Why didn't they find this pach shemen? Why is this one so different? If they didn't find it, they found all the others and they defiled them. Shenes zeh, this miracle, the Metzias pach shemen, haya b'chaf hei b'kislev. This happened on the 25th of Kislev. Vanes shaloi haya b'el lahad, the second miracle. The nes shaloi haya boy, there wasn't in it, in this flask, el lahadlik yom echad, to light for one day. Vidliku mimena, and they lit from it shmeni yomim, 8 days. That's the miracle that most people know about, right? If you ask your average Jewish kid on the street, he'll say, oh, because there was oil for one day and it lit for 8 days, right? Well, that, interesting enough, is the last of 3 miracles. The nes zeh hu schal, what's hu tchal? What's the root? What? Tchila, right, beginning. Right? Okay, began, passive. The nezeh hutchal began b'chav vav b'kislev. That was chav vav. Now it's interesting, just to point out one thing. That was chav vav according to almost every shita. There is an interesting shita of the Ritva, right? Because the question arises. In this Maimer it doesn't, because the Rebbe's already taken care of it. But in many, many places in Chassidus and in just Bechlal, in general, Torah, people talking about Hanukkah. Simple pshat in the oil. How many days of miracle were there with the oil?
You would say 8, right?
No, there weren't 8. It's not true.
It was
What?
7.
7 days miracle. There was enough oil for one day.
Oh, I thought we just said there wasn't enough oil for one day.
There was enough oil for one day. Never said there wasn't, ever. At no point did we ever say that. No. There was enough oil for one day. It burnt for 8. How many days of miracle? So why is it an 8-day holiday? It should be a 7-day holiday.
Finding no
But
oil.
I don't want you to answer the question as if there's no question. That's not the way to deal with a question. First of all, you have to appreciate the fact that there's a question. Oh, I never thought of that. That's very interesting. There's really only 7 days. Now, there are 3 basic answers to that question in Rishonim. One is the Meiri that we just saw, we're celebrating. And in this Maimer, there's no question. Why? Well, because we already said there's a 3rd miracle, finding the Pach Shemen. When did that happen? The 25th. So we're celebrating that. That's the 8th day. That's the 1st day, which ends up being, adding another day to the miracle. Right? The Rambam, what would the Rambam say? Why is it an 8-day holiday? What are you celebrating? What's the extra day? 7 days with the miracle in the oil, but there's an extra thing you're celebrating. What else are you celebrating? The war. You won the war. You're celebrating that for a day. Oh, okay. And then there's the position of the Ritva, which is the most fascinating position. Another Rishon. Right? And the reason I'm saying that is because based on what we just said, you wouldn't say that this line in the Ritva. The Ritva says they filled, and this also answers the question that it deals with the question that the Rebbe asked. Ritva said they filled it up with enough oil for one day. I'm sorry. The first day, they only filled it up with an eighth of the oil, knowing that they were going to have to make this oil last for 8 days. So they didn't really do the mitzvah the first day. They said, look, we're going to do a zecher to the mitzvah. We're not going to do the mitzvah the way it should be, which is fill it all up. We're just going to, we want to light the menorah, but we're only going to light it with an eighth of the oil because we know we have to use this oil for 8 days before we're going to get pure oil. It's going to take 8 days for the pure oil to be processed, etc., and then we'll be able to use it on the 9th day. Okay, so they knew that. They knew how this works. Okay, so they only lit an eighth, and it burned all night. Meaning the oil burned as if it had been full. Every day there was a miracle. So that according to the Ritva, there's 8 days of miracle with the oil. According to the Ritva, it's the only one. That's his pshat. It's an amazing pshat in the whole story. But that's the Ritva's pshat in the story. That it's not that the oil miraculously appeared on the second day. No. They only put in an eighth of the oil each day, knowing that they needed this to last for 8 days. And they basically said, we're not doing the miracle. We're not doing the mitzvah. We're just doing a zecher to the mitzvah. Right? We're like commemorating lighting the menorah. But we're not really lighting the menorah because to light the menorah, you have to fill it up. We're not filling it up. Because we don't have enough oil to fill it up for 8 days. So we'll fill it up an eighth. And each night, it burned as if it was full. So according to the Ritva, Chaf Hei already was a miracle with the oil. And according to the Ritva, that's why it's an 8-day holiday. 3 positions as to why it's an 8-day holiday. Rambam, the war. Meiri, finding the Shemen. Ritva, there was 8 days of miracle in the burning. Those are the 3 positions in Rishonim as to why it's an 8-day holiday. Hanukkah's so much interesting stuff about Hanukkah. Okay, fine. So the line we just read doesn't apply to the Ritva, because we just said that the war was Chaf Dalet, finding was Chaf Hei, and the miracle of the Shemen starts on Chaf Vav. According to the Ritva, that you wouldn't say. It started on Chaf Hei. We said it, but we're not learning like that. That's okay. We're not allowed not to learn like that. Don't worry about that. That's okay. Right? We're learning like everybody else that they filled it up, and then whatever happened, happened. Okay. Chaf Dalet, Chaf Hei, Chaf Vav. Yeah? So second line up from the bottom, the nes in the base, the nes zeh huschal b'chav vav kislev. This miracle started on chav vav. Let's just finish this and we'll stop. Actually, stop on time or maybe even early. I just want you guys all to say Shechianu. Umedayik b'hamaimer, and he says very clearly in the Maimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe, mipnei ma loy hukva ezet. This is a really interesting question. Mipnei ma loy hukva, why was it not established? Eze toisafes davar, some additional thing, something, to commemorate what? B'yom chavav b'kislev, on the 26th. Shaboy huschal neis, that's when it began, the neis of haspakas hashemen, of the shemen sufficing, must speak, it's enough, right? The haspakat shemen, the fact that the shemen was sufficient, the Shmoni Yomim, for 8 days. Because according to the way we're learning, there was a miracle on Chav Daled. Well, the Frierdiker Rebbe already asked, wait, why don't we celebrate anything on Chav Daled? There was a miracle on Chav Hei, which we do celebrate, but we don't understand why. But now, what we're really starting to celebrate on Chav Hei is the Be'ikr is the Milchama. And we don't understand why we don't do that on Chav Dalet. That's the Frierdiker Rebbe's question. But now there's another question the Frierdiker Rebbe asks. Wait a minute, hold on a second. There was a miracle on Chav Dalet. I don't understand why I'm not celebrating that on Chav Dalet. I'm celebrating that on Chav Hei. There was a miracle on Chav Hei. What was the miracle on Chav Hei? Finding the Shemen. And there was a miracle on Chav Vav. What was that? There's oil delight.
Yeah.
So why don't we say an extra l'chaim on Chav Vav Kislev, on the second night of Hanukkah, why don't we make a big shturim of the fact that this is actually when the nace of the Shemin begins? So last night, there was no miracle with the Shemin last night. Right?
Yeah.
So why aren't we doing something, some commemoration of that miracle on the 26th? That's another question the Friedrich Rebbe asks in the whole story of Hanukkah. Mamash Ma'ayan. Okay? So again, just to make sure we understand where we are, because look at the next line, it's always the most important. The point of explanation is as follows. And then obviously that point is going to turn into all sorts of amazing ideas over these pages. We'll see that point tomorrow. But again, what's our question? Two questions. Why is it we're not celebrating Chaf Dalet? Now again, this is from the vantage point of the Friedrich Rebbe and the Maimer, who's learning in accordance with the position that says the Iker holiday is celebrating the victory in the Milchama. That's the Iker. If the Iker is the Milchama, why are we celebrating the 25th and not the 24th? Now, obviously, there's also a miracle with the oil. No one has any questions about that, right? So that's why it's an 8-day holiday. So, because if it were just the war, then you would only have a 1-day holiday, like Purim. So we're also definitely celebrating the oil. So if we are celebrating the oil, so then why not celebrate the 26th as the day when the Iker miracle of the oil starts? When all of a sudden there's still oil here, and everybody wakes up in the morning and goes, "Whoa, wow! Look!" And the WhatsApp groups were just going crazy. You know, did you hear what happened in the Beis Hamikdash? What? There's more oil in the it's still there. Whatever happened. Right? Okay. Just quickly, just the Rebbe's basic shita and what happened with the oil is that they lit it every night, and it burned every night, but it didn't burn. It burned and didn't burn simultaneously. There was a flame all night long, but exactly the same amount of oil was left in the candle at the end of the day. And they lit that the next night. So what were they lighting? Olive oil every night. Now, Mastama, the 8th night, it could have burned normally. Probably did, because it seems that they used regular oil the next day. Otherwise, it'd be a 9-day holiday. Anyway, what happened the 8th day is interesting. He doesn't talk about it. But that's the Rebbe Shita, meaning it was burning and not burning at the same time, which is the greatest of miracles. And what's that like? It's like the Aron Ein Amina Mida. That's what the Rebbe brings in that Sifra. The Aron in the Beis Hamikdash had specific dimensions. 1.5 amos. That's an amma is half a foot, half a meter. 1.5 amos by 2.5 amos by 1.5 amos. It was 1.5 tall, 1.5 wide, and 2.5 long. It had to be exactly that. It was in the middle of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Kodesh HaKadoshim in the Mishkan was 10 amos across, 5 meters across. In the Beis Hamikdash, it was 20 amos across, 10 meters across. Okay, so let's do the Mishkan, just easier math. Right? So from this wall to this point is 5, right? It's 10. So if you go to the middle, it's 5. Okay. Now this is 1.5 wide, so there theoretically would be 4.25 and 4.25, and 1.5 in the middle. But if you measured from the side of the Aron until the wall, it was 5 amos. How can it be 5 amos? This is taking up 1.5 amos. No, it's not. It is, but it's not simultaneously. It's in space, taking up space, but not taking up space at the same time, which is the ultimate in miracles. It's not obliterating natural reality. You still see it taking up space. And if you were to walk into it, you'd get a bruise. So it's in space, but not in space at the same time.
Like when they would bow down, and they would spread out.
Right.
Also,
right. Yeah. There's enough room for everyone. Yeah. They'd be standing, the Beis Hamikdash, when we'd stand up, we'd all be stuck together like in 770. And then when we bowed down, so there was enough room for everybody to bow down. How did that work?
Right.
One of the miracles in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. We will see we'll see the beginning of the answer tomorrow. Ezrat Hashem. It's nice to be back with you in the morning. Wait, what happened?